Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the North to South Show. Today is Wednesday, July the 7th, and before we even begin talking about the segments that I have in store for you guys today, because we do have some good ones in the chat, everyone just drop a happy last month without college football, because next month, starting in August, college football will be back. It is going to be amazing. College football is just around the corner, folks, so get excited, drop a happy last month without college football in the chat for me. I'd love to hear from you guys. And today we got a great show. First of all, I apologize to all of you who were expecting the show on Monday and didn't get it. I had appointments running late. I tried to get back in time. I couldn't, so I apologize for that. But that means that we're back today with some amazing segments and amazing everything that we missed up on Monday. So I really appreciate all of you guys for understanding that. And man, oh man, July has already hit us. The 4th of July has already happened. For me, we celebrate Canada Day up here, which was July 1st, which was just like 3 days before July 4th, obviously. So the summer's going by fast, man. Like the summer, I know it's just started, depends on where you're from. But for me, it's kind of just started, but it is going by fast. The fact that it is already July 7th is crazy to me. And the fact that I just realized something right before I did this show. It's funny that I call this the North to South Show because starting, I don't want to give an official date yet, but starting around August 15th, 16th, the North to South show will actually be moving from the North to the South when I officially go down to the States for school. So interesting there. I can't wait to get down there and just experience my first real college football season down in the South, down in South Carolina. Can't wait to cheer on my Gamecocks and everything like that. It's going to be so much fun. But enough of that. Let me tell you about the segments we got for today. So starting today, we are going to talk about some NIL stuff because on July 1st, starting July 1st, players started being able to monetize their own brand, their name, image, likeness, all stuff like that. So what I want to do in talking about that is not really talk about the whole topic because there's been a lot talked about NIL and everything and how it's affected the game and all this political stuff. I just want to go through and give you guys, I have 6 guys who I think I'm going to go through my top 6 guys kind of. I have 5, but one honorable mention. Talk about which guys I think will be the most monetizable or the guys who had the biggest name brands in all the SEC this season. So that is my first segment, kicking off something with NIL, which I think we talked a bit about it. I think sometime in June or May, we talked about when Georgia passed their bill, we talked a bit about NIL and all stuff like that. But this is more just a fun, laid-back NIL segment, and just I want to talk about the individuals that we have in the SEC who could be making some serious money. Then next up, something really exciting, something that you guys are going to love because this includes all teams over-under predictions. So I went and I got all the DraftKings over-unders, and I went through and I predicted. I give you guys, should you smash the over or should you smash the under for that team this season? So great stuff we got there. And to finish off, I want to talk about the Tennessee Volunteers. Now, of course, me being a South Carolina fan, I'm not a huge Tennessee fan, but I feel like Tennessee is a team that has some great fans that always support this channel. And I haven't talked about them in a while. It's kind of just the way that their program is and the position that their program is in right now. And that's what I want to kind of talk about, give my expectations on how I think the Tennessee Volunteers will do this season. So lots of amazing content to be had and talked about today. And like I said, we will kick off our first segment talking about this NIL stuff, all this new NIL stuff, and me breaking down and giving you guys my top 5 guys in the SEC who I think will have the biggest brands this season. So obviously, if you haven't heard, basically, if you're a college football fan or even just you have news, any source of news, whether that's on Instagram, whether that's you watching TV, whether that's you go on yahoo.com and just read any news from wherever it is, the NIL stuff in the NCAA has been a huge thing throughout the states for the last month or two, especially the last month or two. It's been going on for a while. There's been this constant arguments and bickering and everything like that in those news pieces that come out where it's like, oh, NIL might be coming out next month. And I felt like we've been getting that for like 5 years. And it seems like NCAA football is going to come back each and every year, but we never get that. But finally, on July 1st, 2021, players are allowed to monetize themselves off of player likeness, player name, and player imaging. So I don't want to get into the politics of it. I don't think NIL is a bad thing. I don't necessarily think it's a great thing either. I'm kind of in the middle of it, and I'm not really here to talk about and give you guys my opinion because there's a lot of talking people. There are a lot of people coming out and saying their strong opinions on the NIL. I think it's good that the players are able to make money and they're putting their hard work into something that's not only getting them an education, but also being able to monetize themselves obviously really helps them and their families especially. So I think NIL, it's a good thing, but there's also its negatives, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. I'm going to give you guys my top 5 guys in the SEC who I think have the biggest brand. So starting off, I want to start off with a honorable mention. I have one honorable mention in disclaimer before I even start talking about these guys because you're going to notice a trend here. And it's just the way that it's going to work in college football. The guys who are going to have the biggest brands are going to be at the biggest name schools. It's just going to happen. It doesn't matter how good you are and everything like that. Like, there are some good guys in the SEC that are not on this list. And that's not because they're not good players. It's just how the game works and how branding works and everything like that. It's completely, it's a whole new topic to college football, so I just want to throw that out there. But I'll give you my honorable mention right now. Coming in at my honorable mention, I have Kool-Aid McKinstry. So some stats that I have, I'm going to give you their following on Instagram and maybe Twitter for some of them, the ones that I think are relevant. So Kool-Aid McKinstry has 52.7 thousand followers on Instagram, which is actually pretty decent. I thought that was pretty low from what I was expecting. The average player on like your Alabama and everything like that, your Georgia, your LSU, everything like that. But Kool-Aid McKinstry, I think he's already in the top 5 for following out of all Alabama players, and this guy hasn't even stepped a foot on the field. I mean, his name alone is so brandable. It is so marketable. Get a brand deal with Kool-Aid. I think that would be something amazing. And not just saying his name is cool, but this kid can play. I know he hasn't taken a step foot on a college football field yet, but we all know the talent that this kid has. And if he's anything like some other freshman that came into the SEC a couple of years ago and has a huge breakout season, Kool-Aid McKinstry could be one of the best players in college football in the next coming years. So his name is marketable. He's done a really, really good job building his brand already on Instagram without even taking a step on Bryant-Denny Stadium field or whatever you want to call it. So I think Kool-Aid McKinstry is definitely a guy that you should look out for. Not necessarily this year, but in the next coming years, this guy could have a huge brand, a huge brand. My number 5 guy coming in at number 5, I have a running back. Now, obviously, you're going to guess most of these guys, or a good chunk of these guys, are going to be quarterbacks because quarterbacks, obviously, you look at the NFL, most marketable players. But I have a running back here. Coming in at number 5, I have Zamir White, obviously running back out of the University of Georgia. He has 59.3 thousand followers on Instagram. Georgia is going to be one of those big name schools that really, really works off of, they're really going to help their players in branding. Just saying that you play for the University of Georgia. Like, it's just, they're one of the big name schools, especially in the SEC. And looking at the state of Georgia, I think that you will be able to build a huge brand if you just go to UGA whatsoever, or even just anywhere in the SEC, like any of the southern states. I think if you go to the University of Georgia, you'll be able to build a big brand. Now, Zamir White is probably the premier back in Georgia's backfield. I know Georgia has tons of talent back there, but he's already built a pretty decent brand around him at Georgia. He's a great player, great running back, has a pretty big following. And if he just gets in the branding game and everything like that, Zamir White could be a very marketable guy coming up this year for NIL. Coming in at number 4, I want to talk about a fellow Canadian. Now, obviously, I'm Canadian, but this guy is not only, I don't know if I want to say this guy is the face of the SEC, because you look at the Athlon Sports, if you have picked up your Athlon Sports college football preseason magazine, obviously one of those guys, the one guy from the SEC on there is John Metchi, wide receiver out of Alabama. Now, I'm not saying he's the face of the SEC, but you think SEC football and you think of the talent, especially at the wide receiver position, and John Metchi is going to come into your head, especially with the exit of some big name guys like Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle. You'll have Kadarius Toney, you'll have Kyle Pitts. I know he was a tight end, but John Metchi was that understudy to Devontae Smith who broke out last season, and he is going to be the main guy at Alabama this year. And just going to Alabama, a huge brand opportunity, and him kind of being the premier guy. I'm not saying that he's going to be the most marketable guy on that team, but I think he's definitely one of the better players on that team, 110%. So I think John Metchi, the fact that you see him on the cover of the Athlon Sports College Football Preseason Magazine, and his brand is already pretty big and built. He's got 64,000 followers on Instagram. Twitter, he has 13.3 thousand. I think John Metchi is a really marketable guy. Any wide receiver at Alabama is going to be really marketable, and I think John Metchi is definitely the premier guy over there. So I have him at my number 4 spot. Coming in at number 3, I had the face of the Georgia Bulldogs. I have JT Daniels. He has 62.8 thousand followers on Instagram, 27.4 thousand on Twitter. So his Twitter is actually pretty decent compared to a lot of other players. But JT Daniels, what more could be said? He is the face of the Georgia Bulldogs this season. He is the hope of the Georgia Bulldogs this season because Georgia's always had a really good team, and they've just been waiting for that one quarterback to really glue it all together and be that really, really successful team. And a lot of people feel like JT Daniels is that guy this year. Everyone right now, before taking a snap in the 2021 season. Right now, JT Daniels is a huge guy in Georgia. Everyone loves him. Everyone thinks he's the guy. So you can build a really, really big brand. And again, going to the University of Georgia, being a top 5 team in the nation right now, being the quarterback of top 5 team in the nation is going to help you regardless. So that's why I have JT Daniels at my number 3 spot. Coming in at number 2, Bryce Young, quarterback for Alabama. Now, the exact same thing I just said for JT Daniels. If you are the quarterback, quote unquote, the face of your team or the leader of your team at Alabama, at Georgia, at Clemson, at Ohio State, at Oklahoma, you're going to be able to build a pretty big brand. And I think Bryce Young has done that already without being the starter yet for Alabama, without going out and being the guy at Alabama. The guy already has 82,600 followers on Instagram. He has 17,000 on Twitter. He's the future of Alabama football, and Alabama football obviously being the biggest college football program. So you're going to have some huge, huge branding opportunities for Bryce Young, and his future starts in the 2021 season when he takes his first snap against Miami, and I think it'll only go up from there. So Bryce Young, without even taking, I want to say, a meaningful snap at Alabama yet, is going to have one of the biggest brands in all of college football this season. Coming in at number 1, I don't have a quarterback. I don't have a running back. I don't have a wide receiver. I don't even have an offensive player. I have a defensive player, which is something that you don't normally see because you look at the NFL. Who are the marketable guys? You have Patrick Mahomes. You have Tom Brady. You have Lamar Jackson. Now you have Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers. You just look, it's all offense. Wide receivers are very marketable. Running backs are very marketable. Quarterbacks are very marketable. But the defensive guys, I have a defensive guy number 1, and I think the stats prove it. Derek Stingley is my number 1 guy, obviously going to a big-time school like Alabama, but Derek Stingley, everyone knows that he's one of the best players in all of the country right now. He has 135,000 followers on Instagram already, so this is going to be his 3rd season at LSU. He has 45.3 thousand on Twitter. The guy is just one of those. If you look at the top, recognizable and biggest name guys in college football right now, number 1, the guy who's going to profit mostly off of NIL is going to be Spencer Rattler. The guy has almost 400,000 followers on Instagram. He is the Heisman favorite. He is kind of the face of college football right now. But then after that, I think Derek Stingley's not at Spencer Rattler's level right now, but for being a defensive player, he is pretty dang close to being the face of college football. He is kind of the face of college football for defensive players because he has just been that guy, that really, really solid corner. He was on a national championship winning team, and he just knows how to brand himself. He's built an amazing following on Instagram already. So I think Derek Stingley is the most marketable and will have the biggest brand name in all the SEC for this upcoming season. So that was my first segment, guys. Just a little intel of the SEC and NIL, and I just wanted to talk about some of the players that I think will really, really benefit off of this. And obviously, you're going to have tons of guys. It doesn't matter what school you go to in the SEC. Locally, you're going to have so many different branding opportunities. It doesn't matter if you go to school in Oxford, Mississippi, if you go to school in Columbia, South Carolina, Columbia, Missouri, Lexington, Kentucky. If you play well enough, you're going to get brand deals locally. But I just wanted to break down some of the guys that I think on a more national scale level can definitely really, really benefit off of their brand name and everything. So that was the first segment, guys. I just want to take some time now to say hello to everyone. So if you are in here, say hello, drop a hello before we get into our next segment, breaking down the over and unders by DraftKings and me telling you what you guys should do. Hit the over, hit the under. So I'm really, really excited for that segment. Lots of great stuff to be talked about there. I'm really, this is one of the most excited, or this is, I feel, one of the best segments I've ever done. So I'm really, really excited for that one. But just everyone say hello. We got Williams Grimes. I'll bring your comment up there. How's it going? I appreciate you coming out, sir. Anyone else? I always love shouting you guys out. I always love saying hello because you guys mean a ton to me just coming on here and engaging with the content and doing everything. So you guys, I love all you guys. So I always want to respect you guys and not just be a talking head and talking at you guys constantly, but I also want to engage with you guys. We also, if we have time, we might do a short Q&A at the end of the show. Just want to throw that in there too, because I know you guys also love asking questions and everything like that. Got Credence Wood saying, hey, how's it going, Credence? I appreciate you coming on again. Obviously, all loyal subscribers in here. We got Credence, we got William, we got Sam, who dropped a comment earlier. So, Sam, I appreciate you coming on too. Always appreciate all of you guys coming in each and every Monday and Wednesday. I mean, you guys are household names on this show, always showing up. So, I really, really appreciate it, all of you guys. So, now I guess we should get into our over and under segment in the SEC. Now, I just went on the live DraftKings bookie over under SEC odds, whatever you want to call it. Now, I'm not saying that I'm endorsing gambling or anything. I don't think, if you don't feel comfortable with it, don't spend your money or anything like that. Like, this is something that I just think is fun and puts it creates really good conversation around SEC teams and how we expect them to do this season, because the over under, basically, if you don't know, the over under is trying to pick the middle number in between a team's expected win total this season. So, for example, they'll say, like, let's pick Missouri. So DraftKings will come out and give an option for you to be able to bet over under Missouri 6.5 wins. Now, over means you think Missouri is going to have over 6.5 wins this season. So obviously that will be 7-12. These are going to be regular season, and under means that they'll have anywhere from 0 to 6 wins. And then you'll get a certain odd on each one. So that's what over under is, if you don't know about it. And that's what I'm basically going to be going through and telling you guys today is I have all the odds for all the SEC teams, all the over under totals. And I'm going to be telling you, should you hit the over button, or do I think you should hit the under button? So first off, we're going to go division by division, and we're going to go alphabetically in division. So we'll start off with the SEC East, starting off with Florida. Now, Florida is at an over-under of 9 this season. I personally think that's a bit high, and you just look at some of the games. When you have Alabama on the schedule, when you have Georgia on the schedule, when you have to travel to LSU, those are 3 losable games, really, really losable games in my mind. And then having to go throughout the rest of the schedule against teams like, I think Kentucky will be a decent component for Florida this year. I think Missouri will be a decent opponent for Florida this year. You're expected to go through all those games without a single slip up. It's really tough for me to call. So I am going with 9 wins. If this was 8.5, I might say you could go the over with Florida, but that 9 win mark, which means you have to have 10 to 12 wins for Florida for this to hit, I'm going the under for Florida. So under 9 wins for Florida. Next up, we have Georgia. Georgia at 10.5, over under 10.5, which is relatively high for the Georgia Bulldogs, but we know the expectation for them this year, and it is playoff or bust for Florida or Georgia Bulldog fans. They want to make the playoffs this season. The Clemson game means a lot because, again, I've said it, I think Georgia's going to win the game. I still, until something happens that changes my mind, and up until this point, because this is going to be the first game of the season, it'll have to be an injury or something like that. I still feel really strongly that Georgia's going to come out of that game with the win. And even if they don't, you have your one slip up against Clemson, yeah, you lose that game. I just look at the rest of the games on the schedule for Georgia. Your biggest matchup is going to be against Florida, and then maybe like your Missouri, Kentucky, and maybe traveling to Auburn. I think those are all going to be winnable games, pretty winnable games for Georgia. So even if they slip up against Clemson, you still have a really good chance at getting 11 wins. And again, I said it, I think they're going to beat Clemson. Let's say they beat Clemson. You get one slip up for Georgia, and I think that they can easily go through the last 11 of the games 10-1. So I am smashing the over for the Georgia Bulldogs at 10.5. Next up, we have Kentucky. Now, Kentucky's over-under is at 7. Earlier in the day, it was at like 6.5, but it's changed, so I kind of had to adjust. I still feel really, really strongly about hitting the over for Kentucky. I think Kentucky's an underrated team, especially if this was at 6.5. I think this would be one of the best bets of all the SEC over-unders for you to take Kentucky over 6.5, but I'm still going to take the over at 7. Look, their tough games are going to be obviously Georgia, obviously Florida, and LSU coming there. Those are going to be 3 tough games. So you play a 12-game schedule. That's going to put you, let's say you lose all those games, that's going to put you at 9 wins. You have one more loss to take, and that will probably be against the only other teams that I see that are losable games on here for Kentucky is really only like your Missouri. Let's say you lose to Missouri, you lose to Florida, you lose to LSU, and you lose to Georgia. That puts you at 8 wins still. You still beat, in my opinion, you're still going to beat Mississippi State. You're still going to beat your like Tennessees, your Vanderbilts, your New Mexico States, your Louisvilles. I know I'm a South Carolina fan, but I still think Kentucky, South Carolina will be a good game. And that's just putting into perspective that Kentucky loses all 4 of those games to Georgia, LSU, Florida, and Missouri. I think that they have a really good shot against Missouri. I think that they have a decent shot against Florida. I think even LSU is a decent shot. Now, I think going to Georgia is a bit of a long shot, but if Kentucky can go 1-2 in those games against Florida, LSU, and Georgia, which I think they have a good chance, or if they go 2-4 against Missouri, Florida, or 2-2 against Missouri, Florida, LSU, and Georgia, I think they hit the over easily. So I'm going smash the over for Kentucky, over 7 wins. Next up, we have the Missouri Tigers. Now, Missouri's kind of in the same boat as Kentucky. They're right at that 7 mark too, over under 7. And for them, I'm going to smash the over 2. I think this team has a really good chance of starting the season out 4-0. So they go Central Michigan's their first game. Then they go to Kentucky, which again, talking about the last one, that's kind of a 50-50 toss-up game. First SEC game, I think, of the whole SEC season. I don't think there's an SEC game before that. So that's going to be the first SEC game of the season for both of those teams and anyone in the SEC. Then you get Southeast Missouri, and then you go to Boston College. I think that those are 4 winnable games for Missouri, a good chance to start out 4-0. And then after that, up until Texas A&M, you get Tennessee and North Texas after that. So I think Missouri's in a really good spot to maybe start the season out 6-0. At least, even if they drop the game to Kentucky, I think you're looking at a good spot. They will be probably around 5-1 in my opinion. Texas A&M, I think, is going to be a loss. Georgia's, I think, is going to be a loss. Florida's a toss-up game. I still think probably that they're going to be underdogs in that game, but that doesn't mean that I don't think Missouri can win this game. But for the concept of this video, let's chalk it down. Florida's a loss, Georgia's a loss, and Texas A&M is a loss. And even throwing Kentucky as a loss, that is 4 losses. That puts you at 8-4. And you look at the rest of the teams they play. At Arkansas might be a challenging game, but I still think Missouri has a really, really good shot to come out of that one. You look at Vanderbilt, you look at your like Boston College, even though you're traveling to Boston College, I see that as a win. And then you got your like South Carolinas, your Tennessees. I'm smashing the over for Missouri as well. I think that this team is good enough to win over 7 games this season. Now, this one's kind of a joke to me, honestly, because I think for over 4.5 wins or under 4.5 wins, I think that is way more reasonable for South Carolina than at 3.5. Of course, I'm taking the over, and this isn't just because I'm a South Carolina fan. I'm taking the over 3.5, 100% for South Carolina this season. Eastern Illinois, at East Carolina, Troy, and Vanderbilt, in my opinion, are the Gamecocks' 4 wins that are on the table for them. Now, I'm not saying that any of these are easy games by any stretch. They still have to go out and perform, but I think those are 4 games that the Gamecocks will be favored in, and I think that they'll come out with wins in all 4 of those. And that's not even talking about, I think South Carolina has a chance to go to Neyland Stadium this season and come out with a win against Tennessee. I think they have a chance against Kentucky this season, going to Missouri. I think it's going to be a bit of a tougher game for South Carolina. I'm not saying that it's completely unreasonable that South Carolina wins that game, but I think traveling to Missouri will be tough. Probably you're going to have a loss against your Clemson, your Florida, your Texas A&M, and your Georgia. Auburn might even be a winnable game for South Carolina. I'm not saying, again, that they'll be favored in that, but I don't see them a reason why they can't beat Auburn. So the fact that the Gamecocks right now are at 3.5 wins over under, I smash the over easily. I'm even taking it over 4.5. 5.5 is the point where I get really, really questionable. Are the Gamecocks ready to win 6 games this season? But I think 3.5 is an absolute joke to me. Smash the Gamecocks over 3.5, 110%. Now we have the Tennessee Volunteers. Now, Tennessee is the team that we're going to talk about later in the show, but they are at over under 6 wins. 6 wins this season for Tennessee. Now, Tennessee's always has a tough slate because not only do you have your classic Georgias, your Floridas in the East, I think even Missouri and Kentucky, I'll say it multiple times that I think they're decent opponents this year. But out of the West, you always have Alabama like you do. You travel there this season. And then you have Ole Miss coming to town, who Ole Miss is going to be a really, really good ball team this year. So you start off the season. I think Tennessee has a good chance to start off the season 3-0. I think you'll beat Bowling Green. I think Pitt is going to be a very interesting game, kind of a toss-up game there. But I think it's definitely a game that Tennessee can win. I'm not saying that Pitt has no chance in it, but it's a game that both those teams could easily win. It's not one of those games that one team is going to be some huge favorite. And then you have Tennessee Tech after that. And after that is where it starts to get tough. You go to Florida, you go to Missouri, you get South Carolina at home, and then you have your two SEC West teams, Ole Miss, and then at Alabama. Then you go to Kentucky, Georgia at home, and South Alabama and Vanderbilt as wins. So I say, even if you chalk it up, like I'm trying to pick out, if you pick out games that I'd say are reasonable for Tennessee to win, I go Bowling Green, Pitt, Tennessee Tech, South Carolina, South Alabama, and then Vanderbilt, and that only puts you at 6 wins. So, and I think that they slip up in one of those games probably to either Pitt or South Carolina. So I'm putting Tennessee at the under 6 wins this season. Finishing up in the SEC East, I have Vanderbilt. Now, Vanderbilt this season, obviously they didn't even win a single game last year. How does the schedule favor out for Vanderbilt this season? The SEC slate, I don't know if Vanderbilt's going to come out with the win. I'm just going to be honest there. The out-of-conference opponents, you get East Tennessee to start off this season. I'm hoping that they'll be able to win that game. You travel to Colorado State, which I don't even know if that's probably a toss-up game. Stanford at home, I think Stanford wins that. Then you got Georgia. And then your only other out-of-conference game is UConn. Does this Vanderbilt team win 4 games? I can't say that confidently. So I am going the under 3 wins for Vanderbilt this season. Moving on to the SEC West. Now, obviously, we're going to go in alphabetical order, and that brings us to the big dogs, where we have Alabama at over or under 11.5. And you all know what that means when you hear 11.5. It is this Alabama team going to go undefeated this season? This is really tough for me because you're talking about this Alabama team that, yes, had a lot of turnover. They have a lot of new guys coming in, but that's not to say that this team isn't talented. Let's not forget they're Alabama. To say that they're going to go throughout this whole season and not slip up once when they still have to play opponents like Texas A&M, traveling to Texas A&M, they still got to play LSU, who's a really talented team. You still got to play in your rivalry game at Auburn this year. You play Florida first game of the season. You play Miami first game of the season. You have to travel to Florida. You still have to play Ole Miss. Got tons of talent in this Alabama schedule. Saying that they're going to go through it flawless is saying a lot about this team. And I honestly think that this Alabama team is good enough to go undefeated this season. So I am taking the over 11.5. Bold take there, over 11.5 for Alabama this season. This team goes 12-0 undefeated in the regular season. Next up, we have Arkansas at an over-under of 6 win total. This was the toughest one for me, I'm not going to lie, because I really want to root for this Arkansas team. I think that this is a really likable and lovable team in Arkansas. I really want to see them do good this year. But a 7-win team to smash the over for Arkansas right now is really, really, really tough for me to call, especially when you have one of the toughest schedules in all of college football, because not only do you have to go to Georgia this season for your rotating SEC East opponent, you still got to go to Ole Miss, you got to go to Alabama, you got to go to LSU, you still got to play like Auburn and all those guys, Texas A&M. You have Texas coming into Arkansas. Now, that's not a easy loss for Arkansas. It's not like Arkansas has no chance against Texas, but to pick out wins here, you got to win against Rice. You got to win against Georgia Southern. You got to win against Mississippi State, in my opinion. You got a good chance against Missouri, and then probably your next win is probably looking at Auburn, and then picking a 7th win is really, really, really tough to call for me to smash the over for Arkansas, so I'm going to have to go the under for Arkansas here. I apologize, Razorback fans. I would love to see them win over 7 games. I'd love to see them go undefeated this season, honestly, but just right now, if I had to put money on this, which is what we're talking about because we're doing this in a gambling perspective, I don't know if I'd smash the over for Arkansas. Coming up at number 7, coming up next with a 7 over-under win total, we have the Auburn Tigers. Now, Auburn, obviously coming in with the new coach, with Brian Harsin, lots of interesting stuff this season. They also do have one of the tougher schedules in all of college football this year, because not only do you have to travel to LSU, You have to travel to Texas A&M. You have to travel to South Carolina. You have to travel to Arkansas as well, but you also have to travel to Penn State, which is going to be a huge out-of-conference game, and obviously it's probably going to be a whiteout, not an environment you'd want to play in if you are an opposing or if you are an away team 110%. So picking out wins for Auburn in Brian Harsin's first season, 2 first games I think are wins. You got Akron, you got Alabama State, Georgia State. Probably mark up Mississippi State as a win. That puts you at 4. Then you look at your next probable wins. I look at like South Carolina. I look at Arkansas as probably your 6th. And then even going a 7th is really, really tough to pick out a 7th win here. You're probably looking at Ole Miss or at Penn State, even though at Penn State is going to be really, really tough. It's just way too hard for me to pick out 8 wins here for Auburn. So I am smashing the under for Auburn here, under 7 wins for them. Next up, we have LSU at 8.5, which is pretty high, and a really, really gutsy call to pick the over for this team that has had culture issues the last year. The locker room isn't the greatest and all stuff like that, but the one thing that LSU has, and I think that the thing that they will have to continue, or they will continue to have throughout the next coming seasons, is talent, and I think talent floods this LSU locker room. So this season, I pick out the wins for LSU. Going to UCLA, I'm not going to call that a win yet. We're just going to pick out the easy wins. I have McNeese State. I have Central Michigan. I have Mississippi State. I have Arkansas, I think will be a win for LSU. You have Louisiana Monroe. That's 5 pretty much easy wins for LSU. I think they beat UCLA, so give me a 6 there. I think that they beat Auburn. That's a 7 there. I think that they go to Kentucky and beat them. That's your 8 mark. And now you just got to pick out one more win against Florida, Ole Miss, Alabama, or Texas A&M. And I think they could easily go 1-3 in any one of those games. So I am taking the over for LSU this season. It's gutsy. This is probably the gutsiest call of this whole segment, but I think LSU is really, really talented. And if they just get that locker room culture right this season, if they're coached up well, LSU is going to be a very, very dangerous team. So I'm going over 8.5 for them. Next up, we have Mississippi State. Now, their over-under win total is 6. I thought that was pretty high, especially for the out-of-conference slate that this team has to play, because got Louisiana Tech at home to start off. I think that will probably be a win. NC State at home. I'm not counting that as a win, as an automatic win yet, so I'm sticking at one easy win. At Memphis, I think that could even be a tough matchup. I'm probably going to give Mississippi State the win there, although I don't want to write that down as an automatic win for Mississippi State. But for the sake of this segment, I'll call it a win. Then after that, I think your wins are Vanderbilt. I think wins are Tennessee State, so that puts you at 4. And then you have to go out and win 3 more games. So that's 3 games out of NC State, LSU, Texas A&M, Alabama, Kentucky, Arkansas, at Auburn, and then Ole Miss. I don't know if I could pick out 3 wins out of those games for Mississippi State this season. So that is why I'm smashing the under 6 wins for Mississippi State this upcoming season. Coming up next, second last team, we have Ole Miss. Ole Miss is at 7.5 over under win total this season. Very interesting for them because they are one of the most talented teams offensively, definitely in the SEC. Their just defense is the big question mark there. They play a tougher slate because one of their out-of-conference opponents is Liberty, who you look at that logo and you're like, that should be an easy win for Ole Miss, but you look at what that team did last year, and that actually makes you panic a bit. Ole Miss, 7.5. Let me go through the wins. I think they beat Louisville. I think they beat Austin Peay. I think they beat Tulane. I think you got to win against Arkansas. I think you got to win at Tennessee. I think you got a win definitely versus Vanderbilt. I want to say, and then, so that puts you at 5 automatic wins, and I think winnable games for them. I think them against Liberty, even though Liberty is a good team, I have a win there, so that puts you at 7 wins, and that means you need one more win against Mississippi State, Texas A&M, at Auburn, LSU, or at Alabama. I think at Mississippi State is probably your best bet there, but even at Auburn, I think is a good chance. So I am smashing the over for Ole Miss. Over 7.5 wins for Ole Miss this upcoming season. Finishing off with Texas A&M at a over-under win total of 9.5. Texas A&M is at 9.5. one of the most talented teams in all of the SEC. Really, if Haynes King is going to be the question mark. He is either the answer or the problem for Texas A&M this season, depending on how they do. Because if Haynes King is the answer, I think Texas A&M will do very, very well this season. If he is the problem in the fact that Texas A&M can't get the pass off, maybe their offensive line isn't glued well and they're just getting run over the whole game, and Haynes King is just getting sacked a bunch of times, I think Texas A&M is still a really talented team. So over under 9.5 wins. Wins on the table for Texas A&M. Kent State, even going to Colorado, I'm going to call that a win. New Mexico, Arkansas, Mississippi State. At Missouri's tough. I'll call it a win right now. So that's 6. South Carolina, 7. Prairie View puts you at 8, and then you need 2 more wins against going to LSU, going to Ole Miss, Auburn, or Alabama, and I think that they get that. I think at Ole Miss will probably be a win, and even like Auburn at home should be a win for Texas A&M. So I am smashing the over button here. I think Texas A&M's 2 losses this season are probably going to be, I think they lose to Alabama right now. Currently, I think they lose to Alabama, although it's going to be a very good game, very interesting game. And then LSU's a real toss-up game for me. I don't know where to call that right now. It's the end of the season. Obviously, still tons to be talked about and tons to be looked at for both those teams when they actually hit the field. But I think this Texas A&M team is a double-digit regular season win club, 110%. So that is my over-under segment, guys. I hope you guys really enjoyed that one. Just going to take a quick break before we get into my expectations of the Tennessee Volunteers this season. It's going to be really, really interesting because Tennessee is one of the biggest question marks, in my opinion, in the whole FCC this season. So still lots of great content for you guys upcoming tonight. And then after that, if we have enough time, we will get into a Q&A. So definitely don't leave, guys. Stick around, and we will be back just after this quick and short break. While I'm out taking a drink of water and catching my breath to bring you guys some more amazing content, let me tell you how you guys can contribute to the TDSTOHRS brand. Number 1, as easy as it sounds, nothing helps us out more than your constant support through watching the videos, liking the videos, being subscribed, and commenting. Your engagement is what is most important to us here at TDSTOHRS, and we appreciate your support. Number 2, channel memberships. Down below next to the subscribe button, you will see a button that says join. Click it to join one of our 2 tier levels. Each tier level comes with exclusive emojis and badges, and the upper tiers get exclusive content not available to other subscribers. Payments are monthly, and memberships start at $2.99 a month and only go up to $5.99 a month. 3. In the description, there will be a link for direct contributions to the channel. This is completely voluntary, and the funds you decide to forward us will be used to improve the quality of our content. Your support to the TDSTOHR brand means the world to us, guys, because without you guys, there is no channel. So this is our channel. Thank you for your constant support, and now let's get back to some great content. Let's continue on with the show. The Tennessee Volunteers. I mean, what else can we say about this team? Just been ups and downs, especially for the fan base. The last, what do you want to call it? The last decade, really, but like specifically talking about the last 5 years, like Tennessee has had the talent in the recent years to do something really special, and they just haven't been coached well. They haven't done this. They haven't done that. They haven't got that big signature win that they need to be one of those premier teams in the SEC. And last season, they move on from Jeremy Pruitt, obviously, going on to Josh Heupel coming into this 2021 season. And Tennessee has kind of been, quote unquote, the forgotten team in the SEC, because you see this as a team in Tennessee with a lot of history, a team that is always in the conversation. They might not be the favorite all the time, but they're usually in the conversation for the SEC East and everything like that. And Tennessee has just slipped through the cracks. And I think it has to do a lot with just the narrative of Tennessee this season that, yeah, their program is in a bad spot. Their program has been in a dumpster fire for a long time. But why I want to talk about my expectations for Tennessee is because even as a South Carolina Gamecocks fan, like, I'll be straight honest with you guys, Tennessee is probably my least favorite team in all the SEC, even more than Georgia, even more than Florida. I still hate Clemson more than them, but if we're talking SEC, I really don't like Tennessee. But looking at this team this year, I don't think that this team is trash. I don't think, all those people on social media and everything like that that come out and say this Tennessee team is terrible. This team is like a 2-3 win team. I don't think Tennessee is that bad. I don't think Tennessee is a contender for the East this year. I don't think that they're close to being a contender for the East this year, but I don't think they're a 3-win team. So that's why I want to get into my expectations for Tennessee this season. So obviously, Josh Heupel, I mentioned it already, coming in as a new head coach for the Tennessee Volunteers this season. Now, he's coming from UCF, who one of the more premier and one of the bigger names in the group of five. So you're obviously getting a good guy there. In my opinion, this team is starting from ground zero. What else can you say for Tennessee? You look at the guys that have gone to the NFL draft or the guys who have transferred. I know Tennessee fans don't want to hear about the guys who have transferred because basically Tennessee was a farm team for your Alabamas, your Oklahomas, all those other big-time programs that just want to go out and grab more talent as they go on their championship runs, and Tennessee is just left in the dust, being this quote-unquote farm team that they were last year. 2 of 12 starters returning on offense. Not a good look at all there. And defense is a bit better. Still not great. 5 of 12 returning starters on defense. Tennessee, again, I said they won't be the favorite in the East this year. But what I want to talk about, starting off with the offense more specifically, is I don't think this offense is going to be half bad. The defense is going to be a different story, and we're going to talk about that. But I don't think this offense is going to be half bad. First of all, I want to talk about the quarterback position. You have 4 guys who I'd say the average or the just above average SEC fan would be able to name at least 3 or 4 of the Tennessee quarterbacks that I'm about to name here. You got Harrison Bailey, you got Hendon Hooker, you got Joe Milton, and you got Brian Maurer. So obviously Harrison Bailey and Brian Maurer have been quarterbacks at Tennessee before. They have played in games. They have done all that. So if you're a Tennessee fan or if you've watched a game against Tennessee, there is a decent chance that you have seen either one of those players play. Obviously, you're looking at Garantano and you're looking at Trout, also being 2 of the other quarterbacks for Tennessee in the past however many years, but Harrison Bailey and Brian Maurer have played for Tennessee. Now you look at Joe Milton and Hendon Hooker as well. Hendon Hooker, if that name sounds familiar, it's because he was the starting quarterback at Virginia Tech last season. And if the name Joe Milton sounds familiar, it's because he was the quarterback at Michigan last season, towards the end of the season. My partner on this channel, Birdie, will have some strong opinions about Joe Milton because he is a Michigan fan. He was through the moon about Joe Milton. He thought he was the next Cam Newton and everything. And then his opinions changed severely on Joe Milton after he actually saw him hit the field at Michigan. But what my kind of point of this is, you have talent at the quarterback position. And I feel like that's been a real struggle for Tennessee the last couple of years, is finding that guy at quarterback, finding the consistency in the passing game. Because I think that's where Jeremy Pruitt really, really struggled. Was this Tennessee passing game was never anything special under him. And I think that that's what Josh Heupel is going to have to come into Knoxville and do for this team to get back to where they want to be. Competing for an SEC East, competing for an SEC championship, pushing for a playoff spot, making a playoff spot, and hopefully the end goal for every coach in Power 5 is going to be win a national championship. So that's where Josh Heupel is going to try to get to. But you got to start somewhere, and you got to start with the passing attack. I think you got some really good guys. Zeroing on the 2 guys that I really like as the favorites to be the starting quarterback, Hendon Hooker. I think Hooker has still some work to do with his arm, but I think he has a lot of upside also with his rushing ability. He is really good in his ground game, rushed for a ton of touchdowns at Virginia Tech, a lot of rushing yards, and he is also decent in the passing game. So Hendon Hooker, I feel like you put him in. I think he's a guy who's ready to start at Tennessee and do some damage, be an impact player as soon as you start on the field. I think he will be. I'm not saying he's going to be mistake-free, but he knows how to play college football games because he has been playing at Virginia Tech prior years. And I don't think Harrison Bailey has played the most at Tennessee. He's got in some games and everything like that, but I don't think that he's played more than Hendon Hooker has. And the other guy I just mentioned his name, Harrison Bailey. I think Harrison Bailey has the arm that you want for Tennessee. I like his accuracy. I like his deep downfield accuracy, especially. I like his arm especially. And you look at where his weakness is, I think Hendon Hooker just has the edge over him, rushing and making his own plays and improvising and everything like that. But those 2 guys especially are my 2 favorites for the Tennessee starting quarterback position. You throw either one of those guys in there, and I think you're looking at a pretty good starting point for this Tennessee offense to build that passing game. Obviously, you're going to like Harrison Bailey more for building a passing game, but if you want to talk about offensive production, with a running game that I think this year for Tennessee will be a bit weaker because you lost a lot of talent and everything like that, which we're going to get into a second. having a quarterback that can run would really, really help. So I think the quarterback position is honestly going to be pretty good for Tennessee this season. Looking at receiving wise as well, talking about Jeremy Pruitt again, getting the ball to your outside playmakers was something that your outside talented playmakers, should I say, was something that was a huge struggle for Jeremy Pruitt the last couple of seasons. He was at Tennessee, and that's what Heupel, he's already come out and said, I'm going to get the balls in. I'm going to get the ball in the hands of my playmakers on the outside, especially because we have to. If we want to have any kind of threat to any of these teams, like your Georgias, like your Floridas, like your Alabamas, teams like that, if you want to pose any threat to them, you got to have some guys on the outside who actually get the ball and have the stats to show that they get the ball in their hands. You could have Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, throw all of those guys in a receiving core, but if you can't get the ball in their hands, what good are they? So Josh Heupel is really going to focus on and getting the ball into his playmakers' hands on the outside, and lucky for him, he has a couple of good guys out there. I look at Jalen Hyatt and I look at Velus Jones Jr. to be the two guys to lead this Tennessee receiving core. I think Jalen Hyatt especially is going to be a breakout guy this season. He is due for a breakout season at Tennessee. Tennessee has had some pretty good receivers the last couple seasons. I look back to Jawan Jennings. He was a really good receiver. I remember he always played well against South Carolina. You look at Palmer, obviously last season getting drafted. I'm pretty sure he went to the Chargers. He's Canadian like me, so I'm a big Palmer fan. Josh Palmer, represent Canada. So I think the receiving core for Tennessee this season is going to be just fine. You got talented guys. I think you got two quarterbacks. You got a whole group of quarterbacks. I didn't even mention Joe Milton or Brian Maurer, but I think it's going to be between Hendon Hooker and Harrison Bailey. You got guys who can get them the ball. So I think you got a pretty good starting point in the passing game to get it going for Tennessee. Now, the rushing game is a different story. You lose a lot of your O-line. You lose running backs. You obviously lose Eric Gray. You lose Ty Chandler, who are your two leading rushers last season. You're left with like Jabari Small. He's probably going to be your main running back this season. Didn't get the most touches last year. I think it's going to be a struggle, especially with an offensive line that lost 3 starters. It's going to be tough for Tennessee this season in the running game. So I think the passing game, if Tennessee wants to have any success, if they want any chance at a bowl game, I think the passing game is going to have to be there 110%. Now looking at the defense this season, I think this is the part of this team that is really going to be frustrating for Tennessee fans this season. First of all, let's talk about the good part of this defense. I think the best part of this defense will be the rushing game. This rushing game that was 5th best this rushing defense. The rushing defense that was 5th best in the SEC last season, obviously getting Butler and Middleton back is going to be huge for Tennessee. I think that's the strength of this defense, 110%, your rushing defense. Looking at passing, it was a really, really rough spot for Tennessee last season. And losing guys, especially like Bryce Thompson, guys like that, it is going to be really, really tough to replace all that kind of stuff for Tennessee, especially when they were towards the bottom of the SEC in passing defense last season. The linebackers got hit really hard. Obviously, you lose Henry To'oTo'o. You lose a bunch of other talented guys at the linebacker position. This linebacker room is definitely towards the bottom in the SEC, and I also think the secondary is. So I'm looking at the passing game, again, being the weakness for Tennessee's defense this season. Now comes kind of the part where we talk about expectations, because that's what this video is titled, obviously. Expectations for Tennessee, or my expectations for Tennessee in 2021. And I was kind of talking about in the beginning how I don't think this team is trash. And I really look at this offense, and that's where I find a bit of confidence that this team won't be trash, and a confidence enough to come out here and say, I don't think Tennessee is going to be half bad this season. They're going to be obviously fighting for a bowl game. It is going to be on the cusp. It's going to come down to the last games for Tennessee to decide if they are a bowl team or not. So I have them going around that like 5-6 range this season. I think that they got wins against, they start off against Bowling Green. I think that's a win. You got Pitt. Then you got some other Group of 5 team. I can't remember. I think it's Tennessee Tech you have after that. If I pull up my schedule right here, just give me a second. So they start off against Bowling Green. Then you have Pitt. Then you have Tennessee Tech. You go to Florida. You go to Missouri, South Carolina at home, Ole Miss, at Alabama off, at Kentucky, Georgia, South Alabama, and Vanderbilt. I think you find your wins at your guaranteed wins, South Alabama, Vanderbilt, Bowling Green, and Tennessee Tech. And then from there, I think you have a good chance you're at least splitting Pitt and South Carolina, in my opinion. And then from there, if you just pick up a win, I don't think it's going to happen. But if you pick up a win at Missouri, at Kentucky, I think those are 2 tough games, especially that you have to travel. I think Ole Miss at home is going to be difficult. Georgia's always going to be difficult. And then at Alabama, I think is out of reach. But You just win the games that you're supposed to win. That's going to put you at 4 wins. Then you've got 2, in my opinion, toss-up games against South Carolina and Pitt. Get both those games at Neyland Stadium at home. So there's a good chance that this team makes a bowl game. Now, it all depends. I really feel it all depends on how this defense performs, because I think the offense will put up enough points to give Tennessee a chance to win Saturday in and Saturday out. At least I hope. And I think a lot of Tennessee fans hope that this offense has the talent enough to produce something offensively to do that. But the defense is where it scares me. The defense, especially the secondary, when you go up against huge passing attacks like your Georgias this season, like your Floridas, like your Missouris this season, like your Ole Misses, like your Alabamas, teams like that, how will Tennessee hold up? It's a huge question mark. It is a massive question mark. And even against like your Pitt, your South Carolina, games like that, which are toss-ups to me at the moment, and huge games that will be vital into Tennessee making a bowl game or not, how is this secondary going to perform? How is this linebacker corps going to perform? Because both of these teams won't just run the ball the whole time. Yes, I know that's your strength and everything for Tennessee, but you're going to have to stop the pass at some point if you want to be successful and make a bowl game. So right now, my expectation is Tennessee going around that 5-6 range. And why I wanted to make this video is because Tennessee isn't going to be a terrible team. I think any team in the SEC is going to have talent, and I think Tennessee does have a lot of talent. It's all going to be dependent on how Josh Heupel and this whole coaching staff is able to come in and really change the complexion of the offense. Again, get the ball in the hands of your playmakers, especially. You got to get a passing attack going. You got to gel back together that O-line. You got to get some running game going. I think if you get the passing game going, I think the running game will come along, because if you get a passing game going, that is what teams are going to know you for, and that's what their main focus is going to be on, and that opens up so many holes for the rushing game and everything like that. And then defensively, just being able to stop the pass is my main concern for Tennessee. So wrapping that up, 5-6 wins is my expectation for the Tennessee Volunteers in this 2021 season. Okay, so that is my show for today, guys. Let's do some questions. Any questions down below? Love to hear from you guys all the time, because I mean, that's what we do. Here's the engagement part. We finished up with the segments. Let me hear it down below. I love hearing from you guys. Any questions about the segments or any questions about SEC football, college football in general, be more than happy to answer. What time do we got? We got 7:53. It is 7:53 currently. Pretty long show today. Rate your over-under picks. Here, I'll bring them up on the screen because I see them from earlier. My future win total... my win total futures I placed today. Over Auburn, over 6.5. If I rate them in order, that's probably the pick that I'm a bit questionable about. Auburn. What did I have them? I had them under. Actually, you know what? That's not that bad, because I had them under 7. I hate the whole numbers. I hate how teams do whole numbers. That's so stupid. So having them at 6.5, it's not terrible. I don't think it's the greatest one, but I think that there's still a 50-50 chance of that happening. Ole Miss over 7.5. I like that because I took that in the video. I really like that pick. Virginia over 6.5. I got to pull up Virginia's schedule really quick here. I got my Athlon Sports magazine right here. So I just got all the schedules in the back. Let me bring that up quickly. That's why I love having these magazines, man. Like, I don't have to go on the internet and search up all the stats. I know it might sound a bit old school because, like, oh, you can't. I can just go on to like College Football Reference and all this other stuff and just be able to pull up stats. But having it here in a magazine and stuff like that, and I could just flip through, way easier in my opinion. Way easier. Okay, let's see. Let's take a look at Virginia's schedule. Virginia plays William and Mary, Illinois, at Carolina. So I have 2 wins there. 3, 4. What do you have? 6.5? Over 6.5? I could pick out 6. I could pick out 7 wins here. I have William and Mary, Illinois, Wake Forest. I think at Louisville will be a toss-up game. It'll be interesting there. But other than that, I think Duke's a win. I think you have a good chance against Georgia Tech. At BYU and Notre, actually, I don't know what to think of BYU this year. Obviously, we think they were so good last year. Obviously, they had the second best quarterback in college football, according to the NFL draft, obviously. But I think at BYU could be a winnable game. At Pitt will be a toss-up, and then Virginia Tech at home. I think you could pick out 7 wins there easily. So I'm not going to argue about that Virginia pick. And Arkansas over 5.5. I love that one. I mean, in my video, the segment that I just did, they were over under 6 wins, which is so hard to pick out a 7th win for Arkansas. Like, you're already kind of stretching it, picking out 6 wins for them. But I like that. I think Arkansas is a go-getter team this year. I think that they are going to be super underrated. And if you could get them at good odds, like, I'm going to be expecting that Arkansas over 5.5 is going to be in the plus. It's going to be plus. It's going to be over plus 100. Like, I don't know what the odds you got for that were, but they were definitely going to be over. Like, it's definitely not going to be favored. The under is definitely going to be favored for Arkansas there. So if you want to go for picks to get the bang for your buck and not necessarily pick the favorite all the time, I love that Arkansas over 5.5 pick. Because that has to be over plus 100, 110%. We got another question. Will Tennessee have a top 5 offense in the SEC this season? Heupel took Mizzou from 14th to 1st in his first year as OC. You know what, Aaron? I'm going to be honest. I don't think top 5 is going to be in range this season. I think getting a top 7, if you can get a top half passing attack for Tennessee to start off with this season, I think you will be more than happy for Tennessee in the spot that they are going to be put in. Look, the rushing game this season, I think, is going to be a tough task for Tennessee. I'm not expecting it to be anything special, but really work on the passing game. This isn't a season for Tennessee to go out and do something special in terms of go out and win an SEC East. You got to build on that. Let's see how Heupel does and everything with the offense of the first season. I think limiting mistakes is going to be huge, and really just extending drives and getting the most out of each and every drive that you could get for Tennessee. So do I think they'll have a top 5 offense? No. I think you're shooting more. If Tennessee can get into, I say, the top 8, I think I would be happy as a Tennessee fan if they were able to get a top 8 overall offense in the SEC this season. Yeah, Arkansas plus 120. I like that. If they were favored, I wouldn't take it. But if you got them in the plus to more than double your money, 110%. And that Texas game, that will be a huge turnaround, especially for that over-under. That will be a huge turnaround because they start off the season basically 3-0 there, and you got half of your wins, and then you still got games against Mississippi State. You're still going to have Auburn, which I think could be a win. You're still going to have either like Ole Miss. You're still going to have, who do they play out of they play Missouri still. So you could pick out 3 wins there easily for Arkansas. So I think in your case, I think that Tennessee game will put you in a amazing situation. I'm not saying if they lose that Texas game, they have no chance, but I think you're looking really, really good if they do win that Texas game. Games that I'm thinking about putting money on, I'm not sure about it, is that Georgia game. First of all, where have you got? I don't even know where to get opening lines because what I use right now doesn't have any opening lines. All they have is national championship odds right now. And it's not like I could bet my Gamecocks plus like 25,000 right now, but I'm not going to do it. But when like all the game odds come out, it's going to be interesting. I'm just interested. I don't like gamble a whole lot. Like, I don't spend tons of money at all. I love seeing the odds. Obviously, I love seeing who's favored, and just it's not only a game for you personally, gambling and everything like that. It is also a game for the bookies because the bookies are always trying to get you on one side. They're trying to get a majority on one side because they're trying to pick the games. It's not only you picking the game, it is the bookies also picking the game because they're trying to pick an upset where they could get a lot of people on one side. For instance, like the LSU UCLA game, they're getting a lot of people on LSU's side, getting a lot of people to bet on LSU because they might feel strongly about UCLA going out and winning that game against LSU. So it's very interesting, very interesting. Lots of interesting stuff to talk about. Do I think Malik Willis is a top 5 QB if we're talking Ole Miss? I mean, Liberty's guy. Top 5 QB in the nation? I don't think so. If I talk about top 5 QBs in the nation right now, Rattler, Howell, Corral, throw JT in there. I'll put him at 4. I'm not scared to do that. You look at other guys. Like, I'm trying to look at the Big Ten. Like, who's going to be your guy there? Like, you're going to have, obviously, whoever Ohio State's quarterback is going to be. It's still up in the air. You're probably your second best quarterback in the Big 12 is probably going to be like who? Graham Mertz out of Wisconsin. You're probably going to be looking at your like Michael Penix, your Tulia Tagovailoa. I don't know if that makes sense. Sean Clifford, Ryan Helinski. Just trying to name some of the Big Ten quarterbacks. Looking at Big 12, Casey Thompson out of Texas, Brock Purdy. I don't think he's a top 5 guy. Max Duggan. I don't think so. So you could probably throw in at number 5. Oh, how did I forget DJ Uiagalelei? He's definitely up there, even though I hate Clemson. He's definitely up there. So I don't think Malik Willis is a top 5 guy, but I think he's a top 25 guy, I'd say. He's a talented kid. Really talented kid. Okay, so we just hit 8 o'clock on the dot, kind of. It's 8:01, pretty much. So I appreciate all of you guys tuning in. As always, hit that like button down below, drop a comment, like, subscribe. Thank you for watching, and come back next time.